So, can you see my screen? Yeah,
Yeah, that's a beautiful slide. Love it.
perfect. So this talk is about design tokens in Figma and kind of how to get started today. And I'm not going to go into the details of what design tokens are. We have had some other talks that do that, but I just want to give a very quick intro to kind of try to explain that. So we take a value like the blue we see up here, and we give it a semantic and meaningful name like we see down here, and maybe store that in a platform agnostic way. And it can kind of serve as a source of truth for all our design or branding decisions. So by looking at that token, we immediately know what it's about. And if that token is to be used for a text color, then we know something's going wrong. And you should probably use a different token to do that. So it's kind of all about semantics and also being platform agnostic. But I think others have given a much better explanation of that topic. So I'm the creator of the Figma Tokens plugin, which is available to everyone for free on the Figma community. And I've been doing that for quite a while now. When I think of design tokens, I always think of this ideal world, to have like one source of truth for our design decisions that may be stored outside of Figma, that can serve as a source of truth for designers and developers alike. And as I mentioned, these developers could use this source of truth to drive their theme files like they do right now, but just kind of coded manually right now. Also, design tools could provide native token support, which would be awesome. That would be so great to have, but we are not quite there yet, I would say. So why are we not using design tokens in our design tools yet? The short answer, as I already said, is tools are not there yet. Maybe not. Maybe we are not there yet as a community, but I think we get there closer every day. So we do have some sort of tokens right now. We do have color styles in Figma, which is awesome. We can apply a certain color element, a certain color to an element, and we can create these nested folders containing all these different color styles. But what we don't have is references within them. So this text muted token we have down here should basically be a reference to the color gray 500 we see over here. And when we want to update the gray 500 color, we would like to update the text muted one as well. That would save so much time of going manually through each of these tokens. Also, we do have text styles in Figma, like we can create the same as we do for color styles, but we are unable to kind of define them in an atomic way. So decisions we make as designers, like this font size is of size H5, this is the font family of the heading type, or this is a tighter letter spacing than all the others. We kind of make these decisions, like -5% for a specific letter spacing, but we have no way to really document these decisions. And that would be what I call an atomic way to kind of define your font or type choices. Also, we have auto layout, which is so great to have. But at the same time, we don't have a way to store these values like we do with styles. So we kind of have to apply these values again and again. Also, we can't use any other reusable value and set any other properties, such as drop shadow colors, gradient stops, or maybe sizing or border radius, just to name a few. So there's many more where we could kind of apply the same principle as we do for colors, but we can't do that yet. Now with my plugin Figma tokens, we can do all of that. It's kind of trying to create this ideal world I described before ourselves. So instead of waiting for a design tool to ship that feature, we can create it ourselves with the amazing Figma plugin API and kind of try to get there, even though it's still far away. So what inspired me to work on the Figma tokens plugin it was basically a blog post by Abdul Wahid, who posted into the Friends of Figma Slack if anyone wanted to collaborate on such a plugin to kind of make this a reality of what he was proposing, to have colors and spacing values be available as a token inside of Figma natively. Now, I have already created a few other plugins, such as Batch Styler or Scale or AutoGrid. Maybe you know some of these. So I knew that it would be possible if we just put the effort in. Now, what can you do with Figma tokens? You can apply color tokens, you can apply typography tokens, you can apply spacing tokens, sizing tokens, and so on, and also apply these tokens to specific layers. A few of these are not quite ready yet, such as box shadow is not really able to influence these styles we have, but we'll get there eventually. And also you can use Figma tokens to kind of drive your design styles. Like I mentioned, color and text styles, which is in a way very important, I think, because then we can have these atomic decisions I mentioned before. So let's get started with some live demo really quick and then move on to some best practices. So I hope this live demo is going to work for us. And you can kind of download the plugin in the community store of Figma. It's called Figma Tokens. And when you start it up, you are presented with a welcome screen and are then presented with this screen, which is kind of an empty token list. Now, what I want to do is I want to apply some border radius to these layers. And right now, I don't really have any set. And I could just do it the manual way, but then update these each time I want to update that value. But I can also create a token for that. And I'm going to create one by specifying a name, like small, and a border radius of, like, let's say 8. And I can then apply that token by just left-clicking it. And what happened now is that we can see the 8 up there, as the number 8. And we can also apply it to individual corners, like the top left one, or the bottom right one. Or we can combine these, like the bottom right and the top left one. And what's awesome is that whenever I make a change to this token, like change the value from 8 to 32, it will update all the layers that this token has been applied on. So it can kind of save so much time for me as a design systems author to do this repetitive task of just updating all the values that have been created. So to move on, I can also apply different tokens, for example, sizing. Let's create one in the sizing category. Again, give it a name of small. This time I'm going to go with 16 as a base value. Create that and hit the left mouse button to apply that, and it will update the width and height values. I can also just apply it to one of these, like just the width or just the height. And whenever I make an update, the tokens kind of change the layers. So it just changed it to 32. And what's awesome about the plugin, because I mentioned before that we don't have any references. With the plugins, we do have that. So we can create another one called medium. And this time it's a reference to the token we created before, like sizing.small. Just create that. And now whenever I apply that token, it takes the same value. So when I update the small token, it will also update the medium one because it's a reference to the other one. Kind of the same as we do have in development, but we now have in Figma. So that's a pretty cool feature, I think. And where else could we apply tokens? So we can apply it to auto layout properties. So these layers right here are different auto layout groups, and they have like 8 pixels of spacing in between them. And I want to make that a token. So I create a spacing token. And again, I'm going to go with the 16 of small. And if I right click the token, I get these different choices. So I can apply it as a gap. And I'm going to do just that. So there is a 16 over here, and I'm going to apply the same over there. And whenever I change that token, the auto layout properties change as well. So that is pretty neat, I would say. But what's even greater is we can use math inside of our tokens. So you might be using a spacing scale or a sizing scale, and you can do that within the plugin. So you could create another token, which is called medium. It's a reference to the small token, so spacing.small, but times 2. Going to create that and going to apply that to this layer. And I'm going to go create another token, which is called large. It's going to be spacing.medium times 2. Save that one and apply that one over here. And maybe another one, like an XL, spacing.large times 2. Now, what I can do is I could just update this base token in a way, the small one that all my other tokens reference, update its value, and everything else changes. So I kind of just created a scale of spacing values, which I then can update. I can also apply this to padding values, for example, the horizontal or vertical ones. And whenever I update these, the values in auto layout over here change as well. So that's just a huge time saver, I think. And now how does that work? I kind of store a reference on each layer that you apply the token to that says, hey, this is an item spacing of spacing.small. I don't actually store the value, I just store the token reference. And then whenever you make any updates to tokens, I scan the whole page or the document, or in the future, just a selection, and it updates all the layers that need any updating. So let's try to look at a few more complex examples. So I prepared a foundation file over here that we use in my company. It is kind of a documentation for the different tokens we use or the styles we use in a way. It has a few color styles over here, and it has a few typography styles down there, like display, heading 1, heading 2, and so on. I have a whole lot of styles created on the right. And if I update, or if I start tokens, I can see these same colors over here, like the color tokens. And if I scroll down a little, I can see all my typography styles, which are H1 bold, H2 bold, and so on, and the same in regular. Now, if we look at one of these color tokens, it's kind of just a color value. So there's nothing fancy going on over here. But when it comes to typography, as I mentioned before, we make these atomic choices when we create a type style, which is the font family, the font weight, the line height, and so on. And by using references, we can kind of extract these atomic decisions into their own tokens and then reuse these. Like we have one font family being used. If I show you that down there, we can see these individual tokens. The font sans is object sans. 2 font weights are being used. Several line heights are being used. And several font sizes are also being used. Now, you might see that there is a reference to the name of the token or the font family that we're using. If you as a designer would want to change the font family overall, over all these styles, that would take quite a while. You could either use my other plugin Batch Styler, which does the job, or you could create this tokenized structure of your design decisions. And by just changing this reference, this font sans token, that is down here, I could update all my styles in seconds. So let's say I want to change that to, let's say, Inter. Update, and see everything change in like seconds. So I just changed 20 styles, but just changing the space token. And I also changed the name that's inserted here, and that's an extra a special feature that I'm gonna go into the details a little bit later. But we can kind of architect our design decisions in a way that reuse these atomic decisions, which is such a huge time saver for me. And as I work in multi-brand design systems a lot, I kind of had to do that quite often. So I kind of tried to tinker around by creating a few of these plugins that do that for me in a matter of seconds instead of maybe minutes. So that was kind of the first way of how we can bring tokens into Figma, but there is another way. So this was just the manual creation of tokens. And I'm going to show that to you by using the official Tailwind CSS styles file that you can find on the Figma community. And I will try to use the import styles feature that tokens has. So we are in that document. It contains a lot of text styles, like a huge amount. And I want to change the font of all these. So I can start the Figma tokens plugin, click on get started. And on the top right, there is this button called import styles. And what that will do is it will scan the document for any color or text styles being used locally there. And it will try to extract these atomic decisions for you. So if I just click that, wait a little bit, we can see it populate all the colors that we have created as a color style over to the right. And if we go down to the text styles, we can see that all these typography styles have been created for us, which is a lot. And I can also see that the plugin recognized I'm using just one font family. I'm using like 8 different font weights and different line heights. And by changing that one base token to, I hope this works for Bottomano, I change all these styles again, because it kind of extracted all these decisions for me. And updating any of these tokens makes updating all these styles just so much easier. Now, to show you a few of the other awesome features tokens has is the concept of theming. And I prepared a demo file to do that. I'm going to start up Figma tokens. And this is just a sample layout that I think I took from Mark Andrews' Cabana design system. And it has a few images, a few texts, and it's pretty dark right now. But I've set up a second theme, which is a light theme. And by using tokens and by just swapping the token value or the reference to another one, I can immediately swap themes, like in the Figma plugin, as you might know. So I do have several tokens set up, like a dark one, a white one, background token, and a foreground token. So the naming of my tokens is not really what I would advise, but it kind of gets the point across. So I only use a background token for this background of the site and a foreground token for the foreground, like the text. And I have a light theme over there, and that is kind of inverted. So my foreground is now a dark one, and my background is now a light one. And if I activate that theme, the whole thing changes, like it does in the Figma plugin. But I can go many layers deep and just activate another theme, which is the mono one, maybe deactivate that one. And now you might be asking yourself, why is it a checkbox? Shouldn't it be a toggle between different themes? Like I just want this one theme, dark and light, and so on. But in my opinion, themes can be multidimensional. You could have the color theme, and you could also have maybe a spacing theme, like compressed or relaxed to give more white space to your layers. So in this example, I have created this rounded theme, which just makes everything a bit rounded. And it works with every other theme that you might have created. Like you can combine these and just activate that. And all it does is it has just one token, which is the border radius default. And in my global token set, that is just a 4 pixel value. So by combining these, I can create these different layouts in a way. And I think that's kind of giving me at least CSS Zen Garden vibes, because all I'm doing is just changing the decisions that kind of result in this design. I'm not doing any changes to the styles itself. So that was the theme feature, which I think is pretty awesome. And I'm gonna hop back to the slides. Now to some best practices. So I've been creating this plugin since a while, and I've come up with a few that might be useful to you. And also a few of these are from users. So I'd be very excited to learn how you use tokens or what's your best practices. I think in a way we should use what Figma gives us, and that is color and text styles, which is the closest thing we have to tokens. And I myself, I never apply a color token or a text token directly on a layer. I just use my tokens to kind of control how my styles get built. And I think that's, at least in my case, the better way, because one day Figma will integrate native support for tokens, and then we could still use the plugin to kind of control that for spacing and sizing values. Also create modular scales for spacing, sizing, or font sizes. You could, for example, have a sizing scale, use maybe a base value, and you could also just swap the two that you see here with your scale value. So that could as well be a token. You could multiply one token with another. And that way you'd get completely different sizing or scaling than you would if you just used a raw value. Also use references to create colors. I think that's really important, and that's what saves so much time. Because right now designers have to go into each and every color style to change these. And I think that's work that doesn't really have to be done if we do it automatically. Because developers in the end have that same feature. Why shouldn't we as designers have that? Also, you can kind of make transformations to your colors. You could write CSS-like syntax to use this base value of this blue color here, which in turn creates this global brand default token, which in turn kind of drives this RGBA colors brand default token that just has a different opacity, like 0.9, 0.1. You could have a whole lot of these and just change the space value, and like 20 different styles would get updated, which again is such a huge time saver. Also, that's a pretty cool feature, I think, is that tokens allow us to control gradients. So you could just include a reference to the colors.blue token in this, again, CSS-like syntax, and also specify the degrees, and then just update one of these base values, and the plugin will basically create all these styles for you. So what we don't have in Figma right now natively can be done with the plugin. Also, and that's a cool trick that I learned from a user, Marcelo, in Miami. He's basically creating these base values for hue, like HSL, and you could insert that over here, and then maybe also have a token for these 100%, 90% values. And just by changing the space hue, we can have a totally different set of colors than if we were to just use a hex color. And if you have colors that kind of just change the space hue, then it's pretty easy to just generate a new palette of colors in seconds, I would say. Also, if you're kind of comfortable editing code, you could just go into the JSON tab that you see in the plugin and copy the whole thing over to VS Code, maybe make changes, maybe make bulk changes, and then copy the whole thing back in and hit save, and everything will update. So I think in a way, I give you the freedom to use these tokens and kind of move them to a different project or do with them whatever you want, and then call it a day. And that's pretty great. Also, we heard about documentation of design systems before, and I think token documentation is no different. So keeping it up is a pretty tedious task. I've kind of shown you the feature before where I was replacing the value of the font family from object sans to enter. And I can do that with every token that I kind of can think of. So I have my personal Figma tokens documentation over here, which kind of lists all these tokens. I could just create another token down there. It has the description of that token, like from the color style. It has the color over here with the preview applied. And I could apply a documentation token by right-clicking one and just inserting the raw value or the description of the token or the name. And whenever I update that token, like this, what are we going to change? This blue brand color down there, which is right now 47D6FF. And also we have that same value down there. We have a description of secondary brand color. And if I try to look into my Figma styles and start the one secondary over here, yeah, I do have a description down there, secondary brand color. And if I change that to be 00 at the end, hit update, we can see everything changed. So this is now green, the value changed. We can see the gradients changed, which I didn't kind of influence, but they themselves are a reference to that token. So if you look over here, we have this reference just written in a different way, colors, theme, background, brand primary, which controls this gradient. So I think that is a really powerful way to save time. Now, to wrap things up, we can do a whole lot of things by using what Figma gives us. And we can do a whole lot more by utilizing this plugin API. But I want to show you one more thing. As I was working on the sync feature for Figma tokens that kind of allows you to store your tokens in the cloud, I contacted a few of token storage providers, like people that are building something in that area. And I'm glad I can give you the first like live public demo of what we were working on. So I've worked together with the team from Arcade, which is in the background kind of the company by Dan Mall. And they try to kind of create a solution that stores tokens and also allows you to scale brand decisions with confidence. And let's just try it out. See how it works. All right. Oops. So I have created two microsites, like one article one, like magazine, and I have also created another one, which is this one, this Mario approach, and it has different tokens set up. It is running locally on my device, and I also have the same layout in Figma. If we go over here, we can see the same layout. And I have used Arcade to kind of store my tokens. And if I go over there, I can see this is the Arcade project for that. I have 44 tokens stored. I have 4 members. I have a version of 1.0.14. I see some activity over here, and now I might want to change a few tokens. So I try to do just that. go into the border radius token, hit edit, and edit that token to be not 32 pixels, but maybe just 2. Save the token, go back. And I also want to change the font family, which is right now PT Serif. I want to change that to be, let's say, Archivo. Save the token, go back. And what else? I'm going to change the spacing token, like the 3XL, which is currently 6 rem. And I'm going to change that to 8 rems. Save it, go back. And one more, I'm going to change the landing background token, which right now is a reference to another token. You can see the preview down there. And if I edit that, I want to maybe go with a pure black. Save the token. And if I go to the dashboard, I can now see that I have 4 unpublished changes. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. And I can now publish these. So I'm now happy with the changes and I want to publish them to a new version so that my developers can use this new version. I'm gonna hit publish. And Arcade asks me what kind of release this is. Is it a patch? Is it a minor? Is it a major? And also it asks me for a comment. I'm gonna go with a patch just to update things. And then I'm gonna go publish. So heading back to the dashboard, I can see that we have now got a version of 1.0.15. And I'd like to use these new tokens in development now because I'm a designer and a developer, and I'm gonna just try to update my tokens that I'll be using in development. So I have these 2 pages. They still use the old values. Like this is the PT serif, it's the dark blue. It might also have the border radius of 32, like very rounded corners, and this one as well. So what I can do is I'll move this to the side and open VS Code. I can use in development NPM package called arcade.js, which kind of just fetches the newest tokens for me. And I have to use some sort of configuration, like a project ID, like a version. So I could set this to one specific version, or maybe the draft state of my tokens. I can also define the format I want this to be in. And I know this is very developer specific, but I just want to show it's very easy for developers to update that. And I also have this access token that I need just to gain access to these tokens. And what I can do now is, this is the microsite. I can run a command called arcade build, which tells arcade.js to update the tokens. And as my setup is tokenized, as I'm using all these tokens, everything will update. So I'm hitting arcade build and everything changed. I didn't touch a single line of code. I kind of just updated my tokens. And I think there's some real magic going on here. So if I want to do the same for my blog, yarn arcade build, hit enter, see everything change. And I think that's pretty cool because it allows us designers to kind of change these tokens, allows us as developers to consume these tokens, and we're all talking in the same terms, like pulling from the same source of truth. I think that's kind of the future of this designer and developer collaboration. Now, what if I, as a designer, also want to update my designs because maybe somebody else changed these tokens? I can head on over to Figma, run a plugin called Arcade, which is built on the Figma tokens plugin. It's just kind of built in a way that allows it to be used with Arcade. Now, I've already set up the ID and the secret. And I just want to pull the newest values, really, because this is still using the PT serif. It's still using the very rounded corners, and it still has this dark blue color in the background. Now, I'm just going to hit pull from Arcade, hit apply, maybe just apply to the whole page, and hit update. And there it goes. Just updated all my tokens inside of Figma to be accurate to the source of truth that we have stored. Now, that is one way to do it, but maybe I, as a designer, want to make changes directly in Figma, like control how these tokens work on arcade.com. And I'm going to edit these just now. So the border radius token is right now 2px. I'm going to change that to be 64px, like a really rounded corner. Hit update and see everything change. Now I'm going to change the theme landing background color to, let's say, a reference to global colors blue 500, which is another token that I've created. Hit update and everything changes. going to change one more, which is the theme vibrant background token, change that to be just a black. Hit update and see the new changes. If I head on over to Arcade, which has all my tokens stored, I can see that there has been some activity, like somebody edited the token theme vibrant background 20 seconds ago and 36 seconds ago. I could now publish these, or I could try to see how that looks in development. And I'm going to do that again, head on over to my VS Code. And by changing the version to a draft state, which is the currently stored tokens in both of these, and again, running Arcade build, the site will update to the version that I just created inside of Figma without touching a single line of code, without touching a layer in Figma. I just changed the tokens. Moving on over, again, running Arcade build, and again, I see the changes. So I think a tool like that is going to be the future of how we collaborate with designers, with developers. And I think this gap between designers and developers shouldn't be there if we just talked in the same terms, like using the same tokens, and everything becomes so much clearer if there is one source of truth. So yeah, thank you. And if you ever want to raise a suggestion or kind of create an issue on GitHub, create one, maybe give me some suggestions for the UI. If you need to some help for the getting onboarded stage, head on over to the docs, follow me on Twitter, or just get started with Arcade. Yeah, thank you.
Ian.
Oh my God, I don't know what to say.
It's
amazing.
Ridiculous.
Wow, I'm so happy that you showed Arcade. I just saw it on Twitter one day, and I was asking myself when it is going to be ready for the public. So can you already use it, or
it's still in early access? Okay. And they're kind of looking for teams. So I'm not part of Arcade. I just really like the product. And it's still in early access, and they're looking for teams that want to kind of participate in that. But they're kind of looking for teams that have some high token maturity. And yeah.
Really cool. Yeah, Ian, like I do have to read out some of the amazing reactions that we're having on the chat. Everybody's like, no way, amazing, oh my God. And, you know, emoji of like mind blown. And yeah, it's the future, basically, Isabel is saying. So
Fantastic. Somebody posted it's fantastic.
Fantastic. It's unbelievable. It's awesome, incredible.
Genius.
But we do have questions. We have a lot of them.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, thank you so much for providing all of this content and knowledge, and also like creating all of these amazing plugins, because thanks to your help, we can save a lot of time. And I've been using a lot of your plugins. So thank you so much personally.
Awesome.
For saving me so much time. Well,
I was kind of just scratching my own itch, I guess.
Oh, yes. Yeah, but we can see that actually in your plugins, because I mean, how they work and everything is well thought out. And yeah, I mean, awesome. Thank you so much personally for creating all of these plugins for the community. Very helpful.
And actually, on that note, Sylvia, we do have a question that came up on chat. How can we support your awesome work, Ian? Like financially, do you accept donations? Do you have anything like that available?
I kind of do have a buy me a coffee link. I can post that. And I also do have a Patreon link. So yeah, I just really find building stuff for designers and creators really exciting, and hopefully get to do that a little bit more in the future.
Awesome. We also need to highlight that people want to bombard Figma on Twitter, so they hire you.
People were asking, why hasn't Figma hired Ian yet?
Oh,
cool.
I will run at this recording, and maybe you can, like, maybe this helps.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you want.
All right, shall I get started with some questions?
Yes, and there are also people who would love to buy you a coffee. So if you could post the links to your Patreon and PayPal.
Nice.
in the mural section. That would be cool. Okay, but now up to questions, because there are many, many questions.
Yeah, not so much time, but let's see how far we can get. Well, of course, one of the questions that was voted as an important one, you already pretty much answered. And so probably the person who was writing it as you were explaining the first part of your talk, it was, is there any way to export design tokens to JSON or something for devs? And there you go.
Yeah, so basically you have the option to just use the JSON tab and just hit that export button there. And what it will do is kind of export these tokens to be exported into a format that can be read by, for example, Style Dictionary. But I think there is still a lot of work to be done. So yeah, curious to see if anyone from the community wants to kind of help with that.
Oh, and it was actually one of the questions as well, the Style Dictionary, if it works with it. So right now it is a beginning stage.
Yeah, so it still is buggy, I would say, the export, especially when it comes to typography styles. But one other thing you could use is the JSON bin sync integration. I haven't presented that, but there is a way to store your tokens up there and kind of have your developer communicate with that via API and kind of pull these tokens in. So yeah, you'd have to do some manual work there just by writing some code, I guess, but can be done.
Nice. And for the next question, can developers easily inspect the design and find out which token is being used?
Unfortunately, I don't really have an option to do that within Figma, because the things we see in the Inspect tab, I as a plugin author cannot change. So I can't really do anything about that. But I've been thinking about ways to kind of overlay the designs in a red line aspect, so you can see what tokens are being used. So in the future, there'll hopefully be some sort of way to do that.
Yeah, I think that could be a very handy feature to have, because for now, it's still a lot of the communication between design and development is the handover of the screens. And maybe even it would be nice if it was like a tooltip on the prototype that just pops up and you can just like even navigate with your mouse. Imagine that. Yeah,
I think in the future, we'll have some more options as plugin authors to do that. So right now, we're kind of just limited to what we can do within Figma.
True. And actually, this was an idea that crossed my mind as you were talking, and you just mentioned at the end now that you're like up for feature requests or suggestions from the community. Sure. So here comes one from me. So maybe it's a feature for this plugin or another plugin, since you like to work with them. A way to track how often these tokens are being used, and in order to eliminate unnecessary tokens, like almost like the analytics that Figma gives for the components. If you could do that for the tokens, that could be interesting.
Yeah, I think that could be really nice. Maybe some sort of scan over all the layers that you're using and just tell you, hey, you're using this token so and so often. Yeah, I like it.
Nice. Let's see. So for the teams who develop their own design system, between brackets, React components, and do not rely on a third-party implementation like Arcade, is there a way to update design tokens, key values, and sync into a plugin to be available in Figma and update Figma files?
Sure. So I didn't show that feature before. That's basically the sync feature where you can store your tokens on JSON bin. And that allows developers to write to that. So you can have a different source, edit that, and then in your designs, pull these over and just update the whole page or the selection in the future. And then you'd have the newest values, and you have other people editing these values, not directly inside of Figma, but kind of in a way as I did in Arcade.
And does the Figma tokens plugin have any performance issues in large files?
Yeah, so right now, the only option to update is to update the whole page. But to do that, we kind of have to iterate over all the layers you have in the document. So if that page has a lot of documents, a lot of layers, it can take quite a while. So what I'm currently doing is just create a smaller page with a few tokens, edit them there because that's way faster. And I think I've showed it in the Arcade plugin. There is an option to just update a selection, which is so much faster. And I'll port that over to the Figma tokens plugin in the coming weeks, I guess.
And does it work well and without lagging in files with usage of 100 or more tokens?
The token count itself isn't really the problem. The main problem when updating is the number of layers, because I kind of have to scan the tree of the layers just to find out if there is any reference to a token. And that, yeah, can take a while. But just if one tip would be to split up your pages into smaller ones, because then it works much faster.
Good to know. The tips already from the plugin. And this is an interesting one, but more as like a help request. Can you please help me explain the multiple theme concept to my fellow designers and developers?
Yeah, so I think I mentioned it, the concept of dark and light theme versus a compressed and the relaxed state of tokens or spacing tokens, especially, for example, font sizing when it comes to accessibility could be one way to theme things. Like you just have one with large fonts, one with small fonts, but that doesn't mean that it's exclusive, like just to the light theme. It can be combined with both. So that's why I think of themes as being multidimensional. And yeah, let's see how that works out.
Very nice. Let me see for the next one. Do you need to make all the versions first in different frames, or can you just tweak the tokens?
For the themes, you could, I guess that's about the themes. You could just tweak the tokens, I guess, yeah. So you could create another token set, which is a theme, edit the values, and any token that has the same name that's applied to a layer will get kind of replaced by that value from that theme. So you could just work things out as you go.
And do you create themes by yourself, or are those default tokens generated options?
You could create it yourself. So you could create any name as you want. I don't really give any advice on how to name these things, because I think that the designer itself should control that. What's important is the arrangement of the themes, like what comes last wins if you have multiple applied, and you can drag these around in the plugin UI.
And I guess around the theme topic, the next question is also related to, it's more your understanding of themes or theming in general. So is the theming not something you do early on a design process before you establish your tokens? Why would you expect a theme to change later in the process?
I guess it's not so much about changing the process, but being able to apply different tokens to different layers or different frames you have created, just to kind of work on one design, then port everything over and just apply the different theme. But I think it's still a new topic, at least for the plugin. Yeah, hopefully in the future, we'll know a little bit more about that.
Yeah, and I guess it does sound like an interesting topic of a whole talk as well, right? The understanding of theming, and because we're also using this word for like this aspect of like a lighter or darker thing, but also if you look from a developer's perspective, it's literally a CSS file, right? Yeah. So how do we see these things? And does the Figma token support color modifications such as lighten and darken?
That is actually a feature somebody requested before, and I really like that idea, just to take this base hue value or this base color and lighten it by 10%, as we can do in Sass. I didn't get to it yet, because basically I'm just working on it in the evenings and weekends. But if somebody wants to or has the knowledge to do that, I'd appreciate any PR, I guess.
Cool. And have you tried to sync your tokens from Figma Tokens plugin with zero height, so it may be documented there?
Not yet, but I'm really curious if that would work yet.
Cool. And I think this is an interesting one as well for the people on the call that don't have much of a dev background. Do you need dev background knowledge for using this plugin?
You don't really need it, I would say, because you don't ever have to touch the JSON. You can just kind of use that JSON as your backup, because this is ultimately where your tokens are stored. You could just go ahead and create tokens with the UI, as I did, and apply these. And that has kind of been my goal, to make it designer friendly while still allowing developers to use it in the same way.
And what happens if a designer changes a value that uses a token, not through the token plugin, but through the regular UI of Figma? What happens to this magic link between the tokens and the value settings inside Figma?
I could just show that, because that's something that, could I just override your screen sharing?
Yeah, you just take it over and it will.
Awesome. I'm going to head to the arcade demo, and I think these are the newest values. What I'm going to do is change the background token from this blue to, let's say, a green. Awesome. And I can again hit the import styles button. And what it will give me is kind of a diff between the previously used colors and the new ones. Now that feature is still kind of in development because it's still showing the aliases as different ones, which should be the same. But I'm gonna move this one over to the Figma tokens plugin as well, because right now it wouldn't override that. But as I mentioned, I'm working on that. So that should hopefully be in soon.
Nice. And it looked like there was a lot of dependency on knowing the exact label name of certain things. It may be useful to have an autocomplete, or God forbid, for some of dropdown that looks at available fonts, for example.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So I do have that in Batch Styler, the available fonts, but I'd also like to have some sort of token picker where I could just choose the reference from all my other tokens, or like a color picker. But these are all features that I think are quality of life improvements, because right now my goal was to make it work.
Yeah, nice. So I do have one that is, I guess, more on your workflow, because you showed a little bit of the way you work with Figma. Which plugin did you use to start up the Figma token plugin? Like it looked like a Figma walker. You
can actually just press Command P, I think, and that will launch the native Figma launcher. I think it's been like that for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, maybe.
Okay, it's recent. Nice. Yeah, for some of us coming from Sketch and using the runner, it's kind of a good feature.
It's kind of like Sketch Runner, but without the walking through the layers part, I guess.
Ah, nice. And it also comes from the Visual Studio Code, right? The Command P that you can.
Yeah, I think, a lot of tools use that.
Yeah, nice. All right. Well, Jan, once again, thank you so much. It has been really insightful and awesome to watch.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
I mean, have a look at the mural board. People want to bombard Twitter or Figma on Twitter. So they hire you. Thank you so much. I mean, awesome stuff. Really cool.